Hi, and welcome to the Team Deakins podcast. This podcast is a dialogue between Roger and James Deakins, often joined in the conversation by a guest. It's very informal, and we never know where it will go. We're connecting through Zoom, so bear that in mind when you hear the audio. If you'd like to submit a question or topic, please do so by emailing pod, P-O-D, at rogerdeakins.com. This episode is sponsored by ARRI. More than just the manufacturer of the film industry's top camera and lighting equipment, they are also the innovator behind cinematic lenses such as the Master Prime and Signature Prime lenses. ARRI, truly cinematic. Today we have a cinematographer with us. His credits are far too many to list, but a few are Delicatessen, Seven, Midnight in Paris, Amour, and Uncut Gems. We're happy to welcome Darius Khondji with us today. Darius, thank you for doing this.
Yes,
Thank
Darius,
you.
and welcome.
Thank you. It's so nice to be able to be in contact and talk to you. And such a long time we haven't talked.
Yes, a long time.
It has been far too long. We'd like to start with how you got to where you are today. What path did you follow? Did you go down a different path first and then find cinematography, or did you always want to be a cinematographer from age 5 on? Tell us your story.
From the age 5 on? No, age 5, I don't know. I was in age 5. I was already in France. No, I've always wanted to make films, to work in I wanted to direct films. I really wanted to make film, but direct them. I wanted to be a film director when I was 12 or 13. I started to make my 8mm film, and I wanted to direct. I had this idea of directing that was probably coming a little bit from my brother. I have a brother who grew up in England, was much older than me, but he wanted to be an actor and a director, and probably it came a little bit from him, and it came a lot from my sister, who was 8 years older than me, Christine, and she took me a lot to she took me to see movies. I grew up in a suburb of Paris near Versailles, in a big house. We grew up together, her and I, with my mother. And my brother this brother grew up in England. He became really English. And she took me to see movies, very early on, to see movies when I was maybe 12, 13 at the small cinema in Vaucresson, where I lived in a suburb. And then I went on to see films in Paris, and I became a little bit of a very young cinephile, and I started to make little horror movies in 8mm films, where I played Dracula myself. I was always a Dracula. I was fascinated by vampire, maybe because my sister kept on scaring me a lot in a dark stairway in this big house where I grew up. So she loved scaring me. So I grew up like this, scared by my sister, and I developed a love for films, for like, probably they were like B movies and horror movies, and I was very young. I was not 13 yet, and then movies were forbidden until the age of 13. You couldn't go and see horror movies, and then and I grew up like this, and then there was a movie that. The movie that I wanted to see, my sister took me to see, was King Kong, and then I couldn't see it because I was not 13. Once I was in a theater, there was a check on the identity, the police came and they had to take me out, and I was very frustrated.
Wow.
As the beginning credits started, I was like really very, very, very sad, very frustrated, and I couldn't see this film when I was 13. It was the first King Kong, the Schutzack Cooper version, the 30s. It was a very, very beautiful film that I only saw a few years later. And then it was a lot of coincidence of different things, I think, that arose my passion for cinema, and also probably a little bit from my father side, because he was Iranian. But he was a distributor of films in Iran. He has two cinemas, and he was I don't know if you say distributor or exploitant. In French, you say exploitant is when you buy films to show in a theater.
Exhibitor, yeah.
Exhibitor. He was an exhibitor, and there was a big boxes of photograph and posters of film in one of the room up in the attic of my, and very very young, or younger than that, when I was 7, 8, I rummage in the boxes and look at the photographs, and there was a fascination for cinema, for the object of the camera, this big object at the camera, big camera. At the time, cameras were very big, and I saw pictures of film sets probably, and pictures of actors, and these glossy black and white and color films of the 50s, 60s, when they were for exhibitors. There was this picture that you put in the front of a theater. So all this became like a big bag of fascination for cinema, But it was really film director. I didn't know the cameraman. I was not aware of the cameraman, of the cinematographer, of this idea of the person between the camera and the director. For me, the director was, and also very early on in my young years of cinephilia, the first director that really captivated me as more like figures that I heard the name all the time was Stanley Kubrick and Roman Polanski. And these two were actually film directors that you would see sometime with a camera in their hands, or there was this attraction of the director and the camera. There was something that was not clear that there was a cameraman, in between. So it only took later, until just a few years later, when I started to be captivated by film credits, where I started to look at this name of director of photography, cameraman, director de la photographie. And I started to understand little by little that there was this person that was actually filming, But I was still very young, all this growing. And it became, so I still wanted to be a film director until I went to film school. I went to film school in New York and at NYU for a couple of years. And I think it's really there that it passed from director to cinematographer. It is somewhere there between France and New York, and the cinephilia. You know how it is with cinephilia. You watch films and then you get more and more impregnated by the mood, the feel, the light, the atmosphere, and it corresponds to things in your life where you are also in this thing where you don't really realize what's happening, but little by little you realize that it's not actually directing actors or telling a story with writing a script or adapting a script that you're after, but what you feel is right is more like photographing, the camera. But I don't remember the beginning was very awkward with lighting. I really was bad at lighting. I would like really very, I don't know, just like the beginning were like terrible. Very, very, very painful. The very beginning.
How did you learn? How do you think you learned lighting then?
That's a very good question. I learned by trusting more and more my eye. It took me a long time, It took me a long time, and even today, sometimes, the moment it's only how it is more than anyone. Roger is. I don't know. I know about my doubts, I don't know about yours, but I know about my doubt. And the moment you doubt about you don't doubt, but you don't trust your eye, you don't trust your feeling, your eye, because your feeling goes naturally through your eyes, your emotion, and if you don't trust it, you're in a zone where a blurry zone,
Yeah.
a zone where you're not comfortable. There's something complicated. There's something not right, and and there are these moments of clearance, of clearing, like when you're in a wood and there's a clearing and the light comes on and you can see things, and that where you know what to do, And I don't know how to explain these things, but you know.
It's interesting. No, two of your first films. I know you did a black and white movie called The Treasure of Bitch Islands, but I never saw that. But I hear it was really great. But then the next two films you did with Marc Caro and Jean-Paul Jeunet, I mean, they were very lit. One, City of Lost Children, was only on sets, right? No, but I mean, it was lit because it had to be lit. That you couldn't have shot with natural light. You were creating everything. So that must have been quite a challenge for you.
Oh, you put me back into that time where I wish I'd done everything in natural light and I started with movies only. I envy so much the young cinematographers or not young, whatever, who start their work with natural light, because natural light. I remember when I was taking pictures before I had the chance to have a camera and being able to light and have a crew. I was just doing natural light. I was taking pictures of statues in museums around in Europe mainly, and then in New York, in statues of white statues by the windows and then I was printing them and playing with the minimalism of the light, and it become like really contrasty, and there was at least at the end only one white line on the dark background, and I was playing with natural light all the time, and I don't know why I started to light, I had to light. My first work, I remember in the 80s when I was a camera assistant and I started to little by little to light. It was so awkward. I had to use these lights all the time, and big lights, and it was complicated. It was just complicated, for me at the beginning. And then you're right. And then there was this. I shot probably this music video, and then another short film on dance, on boxing and dance combined, designed by choreographer. A woman choreographer was wonderful, Régine Chopineau, and it was called KOK, a short film in 35 mil that I shot on a stage designed by Marc Caro.
Oh yeah,
one of the director was was the kind of art director of this short piece that was showing her next show to this choreographer. And this together in the 80s, in the late 80s, this and a music video I shot for a singer called Alain Souchon. The two things were noticed by Jean-Pierre Jeunet and probably Marc Caro. They talked together, and they trusted me, and this producer Claudine Ossard was wonderful. They told her that I should shoot their first film, and it was an incredible amount of trust they had, and I shot this film. It was not my first film, but it was my first color film that really, as you say, it was lit. It was all on stage. The whole film was weeks and weeks on stage, and I didn't know how to really. I mean, I grew up with them. We grew up together. I don't know how it happened. It's long ago. It is just. I was certainly not instinctive. I don't think it was instinctive at the times enough, But they just trusted me, and we grew up together, and we did this together, It just and more movies after movies. The movies where I was the more happy with the result were movies where I felt the lighting, the design of the lighting was very. It felt like it was very close to what the director were, who they were, and what they had in their feeling at the time. What they wanted to do. It was those movies were in color, but they were in dark in color. And we applied this technical thing, this bleach bypass process that you had done earlier on, and I had done it on some short films in the in the mid 80s, and then I started to do it on Delicatessen, and then it started, and I did this because I just was after the blacks all the time. I was after,
Yeah.
I was never satisfied by the blacks I was in the photography of the films I was doing. I could see it on other movies, but I couldn't, it was never black enough for me at the time. Now, then it went on the opposite, but at the same time in the 90s I started to go after the opposite way. But in that early 90s and late 80s, the blacks were never black enough, so we had to, as you know, we had to opacify the blacks with leaving silver on the positive.
Yeah.
We were doing it on the positive, and then after on the negative. But anyway, so that's becoming technical. But this is how it started, you know.
How did you and the directors on Delicatessen and City of Your Lost Children come to that sort of visual style? I mean, all your films, most of your films are very different. You seem to be a chameleon, really,
which is
in the
really
way
wonderful.
you shoot.
Yeah.
But so how did that sort of come about, that particular look? I mean, it's quite wide angle lens, and as you say, it's bleach bypass. It's quite sort of graphic. It's almost Germanic in a way, isn't it?
Germanic?
Yeah,
Yes,
it's like
you're very
expressionist in a way.
You're very right. But you put your finger exactly on the style, on what we were looking after. They came out with this great, incredible storyboard that was like a Bible, a great storyboard that was when you were looking at the storyboard, you had the feeling of the warping, you know, of the glass, of the wide angle. You could tell it was already the approach, the presence of the characters were filmed like with a magnifier, a little bit wide, you know, like.
Right.
Then we started to play with, you know, to start getting into the art direction. I mean, in terms of, when I say art direction, is in terms of production design and lighting together and everything.
Yeah.
But they were, everything was there in them, you know. I don't want to sound humble or anything, but everything was already, a lot of it was in them. And I feel I enhance and push the you were mentioning the German expressionists. I maybe brought, you know, we looked at books together, and they were both for Delicatessen, even more so on for City of Lost Children. There were images like paintings of color expressionist painting, like Otto Dix or what's his name, Grossman, or these painters of the German expressionists mixed with American realist painter like George Bellows. These boxers. He painted with his stoplight, you know, and mixed with Martin Lewis, Martin Lewis was illustrator of the time, of the 20s, 30s.
Yeah.
So it was black and white. I never found enough work on Martin Lewis, but I remember these black and white. They looked like etching, but they were like illustration in black and white, where the lighting was very expressive, expressionistic, you know. And so I pushed in that direction probably a little bit. But Marc Caro had already everything. He had already a lot in him. So he was a vacuum, you know. He was taking it and he was giving, and it was a sort of amazing work. Mostly the three of us, because there was not really on Delicatessen, there was not really a proper production designer. Marc Caro like really designed everything, and then there was a very nice Kirka, I think, a production designer from Costa Rica who worked with us, who helped build the structure of the sets. But it was very much Caro's mood, you know, the mood of it, the dark mood of Caro was putting the edge on everything, you know. And Jean-Pierre was very much he's very visual director, and he was very much with the actors, the acting part of it, the scenario, the script, the acting, the editing, all this he was under his grip, you know. But the look, the contrast, they wanted this. I remember the main thing I had, the dilemma, because I started loving really soft light. It was a transition between Fresnel hard light and the soft light, and I couldn't. We were doing tests, and I could tell the soft light was not their thing, but it was my thing more. And the hard light, the moment I was switching on a hard light on the set, they were like struck by the beauty of it, and then I started to say, okay, I'm gonna light the sets with hard light and light the character with soft light.
Good compromise.
I literally said this in my head. It was like crazy, maybe stupid. I don't know if it was a good idea or not, but I remember, it was my very beginning. It was I was my first steps in cinematography. So I said, okay, the sets, I'm going to light everything with hard light, and the characters will be light with bounce or through heavy diffusion or with fluorescent. It was the beginning of, not the beginning, but I was lighting it was my beginning of fluorescent lighting. It was not the beginning. Beginning was started. Even in Metropolis, you can see fluorescent. It's great. You always think you do. When you start, you're very naive. I mean, I was very naive.
Yeah.
I thought I was doing the first one to do the China light, and then I said the China light. I worked with an English producer who said, there is this other DP, Philippe Rousselot, is doing lighting everything with China light. And that was in 91, I remember. I was sure that I had never seen anybody in anything with a paper China light. And then I said, I'm so happy, at least one thing. I start with one thing. And then I go and do this movie with a nice Scottish director in Prague. And just after Delicatessen, and the producer, this young producer, told me, I just work with this DP, Philippe Rousselot, which I already admire. And he said, he likes everything with China. And then we opened in Prague. In Prague, we opened some big old film set warehouses were stored like dusty, gigantic China lights. Gigantic. There was not China light. They were muslin light, but gigantic. So it was Miroslav Ondrychek light for. And I said, "Whoa, okay, a good lesson of humility."
I gotta tell one that I have on that, because when I started out, I used a lot of gold stipple reflectors. I bounce light a lot, and somebody came on my set once. I think it was an electrician. He said, did you get this from John Alcott? John Alcott used to do this a lot. And I said, no, I don't know how John Alcott used to light. You always think you're the first, but it's
What lights were there again?
I was using bounce light, but I was using gold stipple reflectors, slightly soft gold stipple, which is apparently
warm,
and John Alcott
used to use a lot.
Wonderful. But such a beautiful reference, though, John Alcott.
I think, that's quite
it could be a lot worse.
Flattering, really. Yeah, absolutely. So how did you, I mean, then you go from like City of Lost Children, I don't think it was directly, but then you're doing Seven with David Fincher. I mean, it's such a different look. I mean, the blacks are black. There's still that continuity. But, that was quite a departure, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was incredible. It was another departure. I thought, I thought I'd done like good steps in one direction. And suddenly I said, okay, great. It's great. It's fantastic. You start to feel good. And then you're lucky enough to be called by David Fincher, who's an amazing director, who asked me to photograph this film, But again, David Fincher, like everyone knows, is one of the greatest cinematographer himself, So again, it's another direction. But again, it's another director in another direction that has everything in him, in his DNA, everything in terms of lighting, of design, of look, everything was already in him. I was just lucky to be on his side to photograph this film for him and with him. I mean, I don't. It's the truth. And it was a completely different direction, and completely it changed. The intuition had to be completely different. The feeling of the light, all this underexposure direction that we took together with with David, that David pushed me into this direction of underexposure and the beauty of light when it's really very down and dim. Everything, came for this film, and it created another monster in me, another creature. And then I went on. It was very interesting because. So it was one of the most amazing experience to do this film with him. And then I went on to a completely different direction in Stealing Beauty in Tuscany in summer. Imagine after 7 in LA on stage, he's doing this dark movie all about, underexposed and dark and incredible and wet and suddenly gritty. And then you go to the absolute opposite. A director, another wonderful director asks you, it was like pure luck. Another director asks you to do a movie that's completely different. Your emotion, your gut feeling, everything, nothing could be similar. The only thing that you could do, and I never do it enough, was to follow your feeling, your gut feeling for it. You read a script, you hear the director talking, and he drives you across Tuscany, and you talk about the character, about this young girl through Tuscany walking, and the awakening of this young woman in looking at a search of her father, who is her father in Italy, and this woman coming from America. And you follow and you just have to follow this and listen to what the director tells you, the few guidelines. It's completely different. Suddenly you work with a director that does plan séquence, sequence shots, endless sequence shots, and that develop and talks to you about the music of Mozart, and show you La Règle du Jeu, The Rules of the Game by Jean Renoir in his apartment in Rome, and you are totally in ecstasy. It's like the ecstasy of a film cinephile and young cameraman, But the feeling of light and camera is absolute opposite, and that's really wonderful. Is your muscle of emotional muscle and creative muscle working completely at full strength in a different way, But
well, you said earlier that you wish that you had followed your gut more. What did you mean by that?
I just feel, when I think about the past. No, 7, and going to Stealing Beauty. I just feel I love to do it again. You know how it is. I would love to go back there again with what I know now, and just play with light much more intuitively and much more naturally, and just
I think that when you start out, there's such I remember the first time being on a feature film set and having to send the AD out for some aspirins, a bottle of aspirins, because it was just getting to me, the responsibility and the idea that I was here. And so to get past all that responsibility and anxiety to actually lighting the shot and thinking, trying to free yourself to be able to think clearly about what you were doing rather than everything, all the peripheral stuff's around you. That's the hardest thing, isn't it? I find that still hard, frankly.
Yeah, it is the hardest thing. I agree with you. I agree. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure that also when you're working with David Fincher, he's a name, and Brad Pitt's in it. Yeah. So all of that just adds to the stress, because it's not some small unknown movie.
Yes,
or it won't be.
It's add to the stress, but yes, it adds to the. David had done music videos at the time, very, very beautiful, very clever music videos, and he was already very, very, what he is now. He's very, very talented, but he had done one movie, Alien, that was also quite an achievement, this Alien 3. Even though he had problem with it, he was still, for me, it was like, for all of us in Europe, it was quite an exciting film to watch. and but yet he didn't have nothing like the name of now. So it was not so much the name; it was just more for me. The stress was coming, and Brad was this young, very very young, talented actor that was coming up, like a new star. So it was all very exciting, but the stress for me was more like coming from Europe and doing this first film in LA with the system and the pressure of the union and the size of the crew, and the system was completely different. Even though I grew to love it and like it more than our system in Europe, I love now the American system very much, and it's very hard for me when I have to work a different way. But it was a stress of the size of the crew and the language, because I spoke English. But when I started, not American, when I started talking to the gaffer and the grape, and we're all wonderful people, and all wanted to help, and they were great. I mean, I was very lucky to work with this first time, from my first time in the States, to work with this gaffer, this grape, this camera assistant, camera operator. But it was all new, and it had to be so fast. Everything had to be thought of fast and designed and thought. I was not used to work like that. So it was. But David was very, very, very helpful and very friendly and very supportive. Very, very supportive. So it was. It was wonderful. It was one wonderful experience. Very, very difficult. I remember going back at home and falling asleep with the lights on, with my clothes on, like exhausted, because it was a new, different experience, but amazing experience for me.
David obviously allowed you, or your collaboration allowed you to take a lot of risks in a way.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, you could actually play with the light and the way the camera moves and stuff, which is that's the trick, isn't it? When you have that sort of comfort zone that you can actually, spread your wings, as they say, whatever. Yeah. How do you prefer, though? And then you went to Stealing Beauty, but that, I mean, obviously, I think 7 was very constructed, right? And a lot of the films you were saying, Marc Caro and Janus, they really construct the films before they get on set.
Yeah.
But then Stealing Beauty, Bertolucci was much more kind of on the day, right? Working out the shots with the actors.
Completely, Roger. It's exactly as you are saying it. It was exactly so. That's why I went on this film now with Bernardo, and it was. Everything was on the day. We scouted together. We found a house in Tuscany, and we grew it. We designed it together, like the garden, the way the garden will look, how we will shoot at what hours of the day. But everything else, the camera, the découpage, the blocking, was all mostly on the spur of the day. We did some technical scout before and decided how we were going to shoot it. But the camera moved. Everything else was then developed as an inspiration. And for him, it was like a fountain of inspiration. He would have an idea that would generate another idea, that would generate another idea. And that's how he constructed his blocking, and how he will tell the story with the camera. So everything had to be lit after we really did this. We prepared. I rafted things, but I remember having a lot of difficulty. It was again another new experience of shooting on location. I hadn't shot much on location before. I had done all on stage in France with Caro and Genet. Very little location, and suddenly I was in a small house. Playing with and that's where I would like to have the experience now of location, because things have anyway.
Yeah, you can't stop the sun moving. So
Yeah,
how did you deal with that?
Exactly.
I mean, it's always a problem, isn't it?
The sun, exactly. The sun. You have to have a lot of humor with the sun. You have to play with a lot of humor, and I remember if we jump just through an idea, like if we jump time and we go to Lost City of Z,
Yeah.
I remember people, scaring me a lot about Ireland, how much the light changes in Ireland, how quickly it's going to be difficult, to match the scenes. The things can scare you. But there I had the experience of time and I was prepared for it and I decided to embrace it. And the moment you embrace these things, it's magic.